Hi, I'm Mary Kopczynski, the CEO of Regalytics, here with your update on the 21,304 alerts in the last week, and that includes the MLK holiday. 8,921 of those were introduced bills. The regulator of the week is New Jersey State Senate with 2,873 proposed bills, with the Virginia House of Delegates as a runner-up with 801 bills. The most interesting of these New Jersey bills, at least the one that caught my eye, was a proposal that would amend existing state laws to include height and weight as a protected characteristic. And this goes alongside race, creed, color, national origin, ancestry, age, and so on and so forth, which there's a lot of them in New Jersey. But basically, if this passes, if you're too fat, too thin, too tall, or too small, you can't be denied an apartment, a job, etc. The legislation is apparently modeled after a similar law in Michigan, so this is a trend. The topic of the week easily is digital asset ETFs. Okay, so background. What is an ETF? So if you want to buy a stock in, let's say, Chevron, you can buy it and your investment will go up and down depending upon how Chevron performs in the stock market. However, if you want exposure to a concept, like for instance, let's say you wanted to invest in oil and gas, you can buy an oil and gas ETF or exchange traded fund where it's a bundle of oil and gas stocks, including some you've never heard of. ETFs, exchange traded products, ETPs generally, have become increasingly popular over the years, especially for folks looking to expose themselves to ESG concepts. Like, for example, the Hypatia Capital Woman CEO ETF, which is exposure to a bunch of companies where the woman is the CEO. But each ETF has to go to the SEC for approval, and for the last 10 years, a ton of proposed ETFs having to do with Bitcoin, digital assets, blockchain, and more have been with the SEC, being extended and extended and extended with not a yes and a few no's. And one such no was Grayscale, which wanted to turn its Grayscale Bitcoin Trust into an exchange-traded product. The SEC said no, and Grayscale sued and won. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia held that the SEC failed to adequately explain its reasoning in disapproving the listing and trading of Grayscale's proposed ETP. Well, it gets funny because apparently last Tuesday at 4 p.m., a hacker got access to the SEC's Twitter account and, using X, announced 10 minutes later that spot Bitcoin exchange-traded funds were approved. The staff had a response by 4:26 p.m. stating that the social media account had been compromised, deleted the tweets, and shut out the hacker. But in those 15 minutes, the price of Bitcoin went up by $48,000. Furthermore, we know from the Senate committee letter sent to Gary Gensler that the SEC, who is insisting that all financial institutions reporting to it follow its new cybersecurity risk management rule, that the SEC didn't even have multi-factor authentication established on its X account. I mean, that's a matter of clicking a button and generating a code each time someone's going to log in. So if that wasn't dramatic enough, the next day, Gensler puts out his statement and Shazam, Bitcoin spot ETFs are indeed approved. And you can tell from his comments that he is doing so somewhat begrudgingly, including reiterating that the SEC is merit neutral on investments, and these are his words. He said, "I'd note that the underlying assets in the metals ETPs have consumer and industrial uses, while in contrast, Bitcoin is primarily a speculative, volatile asset that is also used for illicit activity, including ransomware, money laundering, sanction evasion, and terrorist financing." Well, I see the SEC is silent on the merit of the investment there, Commissioner Gensler. Beyond that saga, there were a few other interesting alerts this week, starting with the FTC. the FTC proposed an amendment to the COPPA rule, which is the Children's Online Privacy Protection Rule. Comments are due on March 11th. It basically makes it a lot stronger. The FTC also busted a company, Xmode Social, which is a data broker that sells your exact geolocation without your knowledge or consent. The fine is forthcoming, but they basically agreed on what the fine would be, and we will know what that is soon. The FTC continued its work on Fortnite, extending the deadline for gamers and their parents to submit a claim for the compensation from the 2023 settlement with Epic Games. The FTC notified more than 37 million people through email that they could get compensation for dark patterns where they were tricked into making unwanted purchases. The new deadline is February 29th, and Epic agreed to pay $245 million. So if you file the claim, you'll most likely get something. Last on the FTC, they are proposing a rule banning fake reviews. If you want to be at that hearing, it's at 10 a.m. Eastern on February 13th. Speaking of fines, the SEC busted global software company SAP for FCPA violations. Basically, the European division of SAP was caught making bribes in places like South Africa, Malawi, Kenya, Tanzania, Ghana, Indonesia, and Azerbaijan. Their fine is just south of $100 million, and some of that is going to be going to the South African regulators who caught them in the first place. Moving on to the states, Texas proudly announced that it transported more than 100,000 migrants to sanctuary cities, for better or for worse. And Tennessee is the first in the nation to pass an AI bill that protects the music industry, and it's called the Elvis Act, ensuring likeness, voice, and image security. I love me a great acronym. And that's it this week for Regalytics. We have the global supply chain of the world's regulatory alerts in one very easy to use place. If you need a solution for anything related to regulation, give us a call.